We are live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mr. Teacher, Mr. Preacher YouTube channel and podcast. We are here again. I'm Kevin. That's Jake. And we are on a mission to learn what lasts in athletics and share it back with you. We are in our self-control series, number 4. We've already covered 3 very good books in our kind of 5 books of self-control stupid. And we're very excited to cover Chop Wood, Carry Water, the phenomenon that is chop wood, carry water. Jake, before we jump in, how are you doing? You ready to go? Another round?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm definitely ready to go. I'm excited to get into this one. A little different style, for sure, than maybe that we're used to, or maybe that we're used to going through. So I'm excited. I think there's so many good things that we're only going to scratch the surface here, but
Sweet.
I'm ready
Well,
to go.
bless us off. I'm pumped. We'll keep the first draft summary short, and we'll just jump right into those key topics. Including the 49-year roast, including the Warrior Dial, and including the inches and years test. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for another wonderful day, and thank you for the information in front of us that Kevin and I get to discuss and talk about. I pray that it'd be edifying to our audience. And I thank you for Kevin. I thank you for our audience. I thank you for Mr. Medcalf, who wrote this book and put it all down for us to glean from. So bless our time, bless the words that come out of our mouth, and may they be edifying and help people grow. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well said. Chop Wood, Carry Water. Now, this book has been on my reading list. It was one of those books that, multiple people tell you about and you just never quite get to. Yeah, it just seems like TV shows as well. Everybody has those like, oh, you should watch this and watch this and watch this. Like, how many series can I watch? I can't do Game of Thrones and Ted Lasso and Banana Ball all at the same time, Banana Land or whatever it is. So we finally got to it. So what is Chop Wood, Carry Water? Well, it's by Joshua Medcalf, and it is a fictional tale about a hero's journey to mastery. And we're following a character named John, whose aim is to become a samurai archer. At 18 years old, he buys a one-way ticket to what's effectively a samurai archer monastery. And he is going to go from 18 to 28 to become the samurai archer, which was a childhood dream of his and actually his brother's. Now, this is a fictional tale, but according to the book, he has a brother named Jordan who were very close to each other, and they got into an accident. Everybody was good except Jordan. Jordan couldn't talk, he couldn't walk, he couldn't basically do anything. They said for him to get through a day is like running a marathon. So there's this little bit of this, he's going to go do it on behalf of his brother because they had this fascination with this culture and so forth. So he goes to the monastery and he gets mentored by a friendly old sensei named Akira, and Akira. And our goal, or his goal, is just to follow that journey through 33 chapters. They're short chapters. This is a short book. I read it twice just to get a really good feel for what that's like. And so if you imagine that chronological journey from walking in to the end over 10 years and being coached through that process, that is what the book more or less follows. And for our discussion today, we're going to leave a lot of the narrative out. That's kind of the joy of getting the book. So go get the book, bookshop.org, Amazon, Audible, whatever you see fit. And, it takes about a couple hours to read, maybe if you're, a heavy highlighter and note taker like I am, but it doesn't take very long. It's short. So with that said, we're going to just focus on self-control and some of the bigger topics that come up about that. There's a lot about industriousness in that book, or in this book. We covered that way back when. Obviously, a book isn't just one theme. We tend to look at it through just one lens. And so we're going to do our best to pull out the biggest things about self-control and seeing what that is like. So Jake, where should we start? We have self-control, we got samurai, we got chopping wood, carrying water. Where would you like to start?
So, for fun, I just quickly looked it up. Akira. It has some variation, but predominantly it means bright sunlight intelligence or wisdom. I kind of felt like he picked that name on purpose, and I gather that would be why. Well, I think it's fair since we're jumping in right away here. Let's go self-control, simplicity. What's your chop wood, carry water? Let's bring a little bit more context to the name of the book and what he's getting at just in the title.
Yeah. And so as John gets to the monastery, right at the beginning of the book, like he has this extreme fascination of being the samurai archer, correct? And Akira tells him about his first task. The rest of the morning, they must chop wood and carry water. He explains that their community, however we want to define that, was outfitted with every modern convenience except for heat and running water. Instead of gas or electricity, they burn wood for heat and when the weather grew cold. And in order to use water in the bathrooms and kitchen, it must be brought by hand from a well outside. Thus, in order for the community to use water and stay warm during the winter, the community depended on everyone to chop wood and carry water. So there is intentional and humble discomfort, I would say. One of those kind of comfort crisis things. Like they're choosing to have a little bit of discomfort on kind of eat. What is that book, Jake? Like the eat your day, well, not eat your daily bread. Daily bread. What's that?
Huh?
The daily bread little thing journal, like give us this day our daily bread
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But Akira, John gets all excited looking at the targets. He says, "But when will we shoot?" Akira. He says, "Shooting will come soon enough, but you first must chop wood, carry water." Now, I'll pass this to you in a moment, but the idea that I want to heighten is not only the intentional discomfort, but the idea if you're a new trainee, he wasn't even fit enough to shoot. So the process of chopping wood, carrying the water, I mean, if you think of even a couple let's just say a 5-gallon bucket, 2 5-gallon buckets of water, and chopping wood. I mean, so what they're teaching is this practice, this consistency, this routine, in order that they are, have this payoff that they are physically even fit enough to shoot. So it is very alluring on the outset to say, "Oh, I want to go do this thing," when you aren't focused on doing this. So the idea of what is your chop wood, carry water is greatly dependent on your context. So if you're an athlete and you are a pitcher, what is the things, your routine that you do every day? If you're a coach, it gets a little bit more vague, but what is your chop wood, carry water? Do you have an answer to that? Like what's a version of chop wood, carry water in any context of life or athletics?
I mean, this sounds like the Mr. Miyagi thing, right?
Yeah.
Wax on, wax off. And
Mhm.
Danielson is confused as to why on earth he's waxing a car, why on earth he's painting a fence, all that fun stuff. And so you don't necessarily see how it's connected.
Mhm.
And it seems almost like it's not topical to what you're learning, but it's a small step in discipline. And it does have kind of almost unintended, well, obviously intended by the teacher, right, or coach, but unintended from the student's perspective. Hang your jacket up. I'm thinking the new Karate Kid movie. So I see a parallel to that. Do I have a specific example outside of those? No, not off the top of my head. But I think it's good. I think that's what it's getting at here is we're building self-discipline, maybe not in a way that you would normally think. And I think it breaks it down into a simple methodology for us to wrap our heads around and actually be able to start as opposed to, okay, I got to be self-disciplined. I got to do all the things and stuff to be disciplined here. So I think I get it. I get the title. Okay, let's keep rolling here then. The inches of self-control and the 10-year test. Why don't you go ahead and jump there? Give a little background on that.
So the chapter is just the start. It says, "How much is an inch worth?" Now, if you've ever shot anything, whether it's a bow or a gun or a slingshot, an inch matters, especially in the beginning. I forget your analogy of like the plane that goes off 1 degree and eventually ends up just way off. And so Jonathan at the beginning of his shooting, he's like, "Really, an inch?" And no, granted, they're 7 feet away from this target. This is not a long shot. And he says, but it is so much more than that. And he does prod him and pushes him an inch out of the way. and shows him as he misses a target. He says, really, do you know what separates the most wildly successful people from everyone else, John? Luck? Hard work? Nope. Nope. Coming from the right background? Nope. It's inches, John. That's all that separates them. And so he gives this idea of the inches and tests, like the 10-year test. He says, think about your group of friends from high school. I'll read quick. You're all from the same area, same age, and most of you have had similar set of opportunities. And right now, someone might look at all of you and be unable to really see much of a difference. But in 10 years, the differences in your lives will be night and day. Someone you might have thought of as an underachiever might be incredibly successful, while another who flourished in high school might be even struggling to survive. But I can assure you the difference in their lives will always come down to inches. So everything you choose to read, think about, dream, focus on, the people in your circle. Inches might look small up close, but added up over time, they can cover the distance of the universe. So it doesn't take much to read 10 books a day, 10 pages a day, call your parents, go for a walk, talk to a friend. But it's also just as easy not to do those things. So today it's just a hamburger, but over time that adds up. Greatness isn't for the chosen few. Greatness is for the few who choose. So inches. So how much is an inch worth? A lot.
A lot, especially over time, right? And that's kind of what it gets at. So yeah, my analogy is if you start at the same point with someone and you just go 1 degree different from them, right? In a path that's 1 degree different from them, and you both start walking. To begin with, you won't really know much difference at all. But over time, that can be an infinite amount of distance. Like the longer it goes, the further apart you get away, right? And I think it's a really interesting analogy when it comes to self-discipline. And that little details matter. And when you forget about the details one day, it's like, just one day. But that one day can morph into 2, that can morph into a week, that can morph into 7 months. And now those little details have made a wide gap between where you want it to be and where you are. Okay. Or if you take 2 athletes, and the details of maybe it's a technique, right? There's details in a technique that one person's really focused on and working on, and another one's not. You may not notice much of a difference in a year. You may not know much of a difference in 2 years, but at some point there's going to be a wide gap, and you're going to it's almost going to hit you. And, oh, wow, how'd that happen so fast? Kind of a deal, even though it's happened over a long period of time.
Well, and you've laughed at me because let me just give the obvious example because we've talked about this before. I literally sent you a picture recently that my mom sent me. So we had a 30-year, birthday party, 30 years old, right? With my brother. And she had pictures up, like they had this collage, and these are like the old pictures, like whatever. And so she sent me a couple of them. And so I observed, and my kids laughed at me. I showed them the pictures, and you laughed at my brother because what he was wearing, which was fun. But what I looked like at 8 versus 18 versus 28 versus now. Well, I mean, it's not much later, but 10 years time, like it didn't seem like much to say, okay, I work out 5 to 7 days a week. Well, one day that doesn't mean nothing, but over time has meant everything. So I can visually see that. And so when you say the details matter, it's probably why I'm getting a little bit crankier, or I don't even know, but more detailed about when I watch warm-ups and about form, right? So I don't think that the phrase like how you do one thing is how you do everything. I think you have to still choose your F's, like Mark Manson said in our second book, right? But getting down to those details. So if it's let's just take the samurai shooting, like the archery, and you would translate to that pitching, right? So your pitching motion, inches matter. So getting down to that process, that's probably why I admire so many Japanese pitchers or any pitcher that's had a lot of they're really into their routines. I'm fascinated by routines, but the new pitcher for the Dodgers, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, is that how you say it? Something like that?
I have no idea. That
Whatever.
sounds close.
Yeah, something like, I'm sorry, and forgive me. But he just signed with the Dodgers, including Ohtani, but he has they even brought over his trainer. And so my buddy sent his routine, and he doesn't lift weights. He he does all these really unconventional things, like some other pitchers I've been fascinated in the past, but he throws one of those javelins. He does bridges, handstands, just he changed his motion, so he could, runners wouldn't run on him. So the details really do matter, the inches. And just focusing on the inches, I think the point here is that pick those high leverage points and really dial them in. What the effects of that are, great, over time. But having the control to focus on the inches for those biggest things, your motion, your kick, your speed, whatever it is, like your running form. I'm assuming if you're in soccer, like your running form matters. If you're never taught how to run in order to run more efficiently, you're going to be slower, or how to change direction, right? I mean, is your feet in the right spot? Is your knee going over your foot, kind of thing? And I'm speaking out of turn because I'm not a soccer player, but
I love it.
You're nodding with me. So
when I got into high school, we had a speed and agility trainer / coach, and it was one of the most eye-opening experiences to how inefficient a human body can work. And just how your dominant side truly operates in a different function than your non-dominant side. And so I got to watch teammates run, and they'd run, and then he would point out to all of us, like, do you see how his heel or his toe on his left foot kicks out a little bit further than his right foot? Okay, number one, it looks a little funny. Number two, it's an inefficiency in how he runs. Now, it may only be 0.2 of a second that getting that back in line makes him faster or quicker, but that 0.2 seconds can be the difference between getting to a ball first and not getting to a ball first. So that was one of the most eye-opening things where, we do this thing where we'd hop over the line, just a line, and then he'd say, go, and then we had to, as soon as we hit the ground, take off forward. And he would point out how people would almost take 3 to 4 steps to do that, because if their weight was on their dominant foot, or just their body wasn't comfortable doing it, that a normal person would never see. So you talk about a detail to pay attention to. I think that's a great point. I saw it firsthand. And then the other thing that you commented on that I think is worth pointing out is, paying attention to the details, but that doesn't mean following orthodoxy. When you bring up this Japanese pitcher, right? He was focusing on details, but his details looked way different, and how he focused on his details went way different than most people do. So there's not a specific way or a universal way to look at details, and I think that might be more important for coaches to understand and know. But even for athletes, maybe you're wanting to be more flexible, and you're doing it by doing back bridges and a weird movement routine. Like, hey, good for you. Like, go for it. If that's what works for you. If that's what, part of this is self-discipline. You got to stay interested in it, right? So for him, that routine keeps him engaged. I know another pitcher, a little more controversial, is Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer's known for having a weird warm-up routine, and the coaches hate. And I'm like, no, stop doing that. You're not going to do whatever. He's like, this is fine. He got his brain in the right place. They got him to focus on the right details that he needed to pitch at a high level. So don't follow orthodoxy, or you don't have to follow orthodoxy. Details, that attention to detail can come out in a lot of different ways. I think is an important thing to note.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to refrain from is trying to do this with everything, right? I mean, it's very overwhelming when you start looking for inches everywhere. But I think it's the point of, like, the James Clear working smart versus working hard, and working hard, is just to start to develop the habit of that. Pick one thing you want to find the inch of, right? It's your pitching motion. It's your speed and agility. And then I think that trickle effects, like you tend to notice it snowball, where then you start looking for inches everywhere. So I think it's more of the habit than being overwhelmed with everything in there. But there is coaching with inches and coaching without inches, and somewhere in between. I think if you can kind of slowly work towards, okay, our warm-ups, what is the inches of our warm-ups? Okay, what is the inches of our this? And just starting small, and picking kind of like, what are the big things? So for instance, when I was helping with softball this last summer, I wasn't worried about things that didn't happen very often at this age, right? Like situations in the game. It's like, why would we spend the majority of our practicing first and third, time, right? You got to
Mhm.
80-20 the thing and say, okay, I want them like an inch on the base passes to be aggressive. Every chance we get, we're taking a base, because that aggression will allow us to be, have that mindset. We're always taking the free base. Same thing with hitting. It's like, I want you to make contact. Like at this age, if we can get bat to ball and the ball goes in play, odds are we're going to get on base, just with how fielding is at this age. So the inches look different at the developmental stages, but those were two examples of like at the end of the year, we're making contact and we're winning games because we're on third, after 2 pitches.
Mhm.
That stuff pays off versus like, okay, well, we're going to not waste time, but spend things that are, aren't going to happen very often, I would say.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Yep.
yeah.
And I think the book title gets to that point of simplifying your discipline, right? I believe it's a military thing where it's like first thing you do is make your bed.
Yep.
Right. And I know a lot of people that have carried that over into the real world or civilian life, and non-military members of just first thing I do is got to make my bed. It's the one thing I got to do every day, and it has this tendency to snowball into things that you start paying attention to and that you start completing, getting done. So I think there's something to starting small and specific, and then letting it work from there.
Amen.
Cool. All right. Next, self-control to accept one step at a time. Or the answer to how long does X take?
Oh man. I would love to reread this book out of self-control just from a coaching aspect. Like the idea that you're Akira and you're guiding somebody through this. And other thing is having, like, he's a master coach. We can clearly see that from like the talent code perspective. To have the space and time and even the decades difference between you and your what do they call it when you're like the apprentice? Padawan learner, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
To be able to guide somebody through this, like, what a privilege. So if you read this book and you're a coach of any type, young or old or somewhere in between, what a cool thing. So to your point, how long will it take me to be a samurai archer? And Akira smiled. That was his question. Akira smiled and said it would take 10 years. 10 years? Maybe if I didn't have to spend so much time chopping wood and carrying water, then I'd be able to reach my goal faster. Akira replied, if you don't chop wood and carry water, then it will take you 20 years to become an samurai archer. More time passed, and John's shots became more accurate and more powerful. He came to love the sound of the arrow slamming into the target, thwack, thwack, like that peak performance ASMR. I love the sound, that kind of thing. He's like, Akira sensei, I'm more accurate now, and my shots are more powerful than ever. How long will it take me to become a samurai archer? Now, understand, we're on page 19. He's maybe like not even a year into this. He says, you know the answer. It is still 10 years. But what if I devote every waking moment to becoming a samurai archer? No chopping wood or carrying water, just archery. Then it'll take you 30 years. John reached his emotional breaking point. He blurted out, but I don't understand. You will learn, young John, that the reason it takes longer is because with one eye on the goal, you only have one eye for the journey. The key to ice climbing or climbing any mountain is to focus on one solid step at the time. No man climbs a mountain all at once. He climbs it by making one solid step at a time. Or in Nick Saban's words, recently retired Nick Saban, it takes what it takes. So to your point, how long does it take? It takes what it takes. And having the ability to accept that, I don't know if I think it's under self-control, but we want things to rush so quick that we don't always take the time to get there. So, or accept that that's what it takes. So, what did you glean from to take one step at a time?
I think especially in youth sports these days, we get so infatuated with who's on what team and where they are on that team at like 10.
Yeah.
And that's just not healthy. And everyone has a different development pattern. And so when your eyes start looking to the future so early on, that's when you lose that's when you stop paying attention to little details, right? You've expanded your gaze. You're looking beyond what's directly in front of you, and that's when you get tripped up on the rocks that you're not looking at. It's definitely built into culture. It seems like it's growing into culture more and more. This tendency to look at where we're at right now and but that's not where I want to be, and so I'm failing. And no, right? And that's where self-discipline and these details matter, because when you're focusing on the details and you're seeing that you're doing the little details right, then you don't get distracted of how far you still have to go, right? You understand that the path that you're on is going to get you there. It just may take some time. And are you willing to do it? I'm trying to think of the study that was done. And I can't remember it exactly. Having goals and understanding them in the correct perspective is so important. It's not that you can't have goals and never look at like, hey, where do I want to be? But understanding that process is a lot longer and you have a lot more in you to get there than you think you do. And we have a tendency to look far beyond and then get the sense of how small we are and how incapable we are of doing a task.
Well, and the one that stood out to me, and I just want to remember the chapter title before I say it. One Eye for the Journey. Phil Jackson was a fan of this. Like, he got into it, and I haven't read 11 Rings, his book on this. No matter whether you're winning or losing, the point was to focus on the process and neither get too high or too low, but instead to control the controllables. I know that's easy to say. What I'm recalling is, do you remember the movie Facing the Giants? And he has his star player do the death crawl, but he does it blindfolded. So if you haven't heard of this, like the death crawl, this dude goes on the back of a player, and you have to bear crawl. And no wonder it's called the death crawl. First off, bear crawls are terrible. They're up there in the world with burpees. And he's challenging his best player because he's a leader and he doesn't know it, that where you go, buddy, the team follows. And he needs him to get going. And so they call it like the greatest football scene in history. But he blindfolds him and he just encourages him the whole way. Go as far, give me your best. Give me your best. And when it comes to this, to accept one step at a time, if you've done something like that, every step hurts. And if you look up and see where, you say, hey, I want you to go 100 yards, you're going to get to like the 20-yard line and just fall. But he says, no, just one step. Give me one more. He got it in you. And he does a better job than me of yelling and, encouraging and like motivating. But he gets to the end and he looks up. He says, Brock, you're in the end zone. So you can still make it there, just one death crawl step at a time without constantly looking up. And I don't think he would have made it if he would have been unblindfolded. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he says, Brock, take off your blindfold. How far do you think you are right now? And Brock goes, I got to be to at least the 50, coach. Brock, you're in the end zone, right?
Yep.
It is such a great scene of how it's like we see how far off we are, and so it puts us into perspective, like, oh, this is going to be too hard, and it just shuts our bodies down in a way. The thing I was going to mention, and this is kind of the opposite of it, to show you how powerful goals can be put in the right perspective, of there was a study done where they put rats in water, and they just would put them in, see how long they could tread water. Initially, it was like 4 minutes. It was some short number. Just 4 minutes, they drown, right? They're scrambling. Okay, they give up. Boom, dead. And then what they do is they put rats in, and then right about the 4-minute mark, right when they were seeing that most rats would drown and die, they'd reach in and pull them out of the water. And then they'd put those same rats back in the water to see how long that they would tread water for. And it went from about 4 minutes to about 4 hours. So once they realized that salvation might be coming, all of a sudden their bodies found a whole, not even, I don't even think you can call it a different level, like a whole nother stratosphere of functionality and endurance. So yes, it's important to have goals, but they can very easily blind us and put us into perspective that, oh, it's too far, it's too hard, or this is what a normal person would be able to do. And so I'm okay with that. The idea that we have no idea what levels that we can achieve, I think would blow a lot of people's minds, just how powerful we are. And I think it's coming up more and more. I think we're seeing more studies, we're seeing more books that all stems from self-control and self-discipline. So in Brock's case, the coach took away the ability for Brock to doubt himself, took away the ability for Brock to self-talk himself into a place where he couldn't go anymore. He took that away from him and showed him, if you get rid of that negativity, you can do a lot more than you ever thought you could.
Yeah, that's how the book ends too. It says, you are more powerful than you ever realize. Act accordingly. Great. I'll never forget reading that study, because it's one of those ones where you're reading and you verbally shout out, you're like, no way. Like you shake your head, you're like, no way. And that's kind of the point of, if you're looking for more flow in your life, we are always told, forget about flow, struggle better, and recover gracefully. Kind of that four parts flow cycle. It's kind of like a lion. You go hunt and you rest. And so chop wood, carry water, rest. Chop wood, carry water, rest. And you can go a long way for that. And eventually you look up, you're like, well, that's a good view.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, let's keep chugging. Self-control, to know you are more, to know your value is beyond what you do.
This one's so easy. There was several times in the book, so I didn't name all the traps, but there were several times in the book they talked about falling into common traps. And in this stage, the chapter title is, where do you find your identity? And how easy that is to misplace. So John does go and, start practicing more, more and more and more and more. So he's ignoring the previous lesson. He's like, practice is good, but too much practice is not. Your muscles have torn and they need time in order to heal. So John has broken this rule. Now he's hurt and now he can't shoot. He's got to rest for 6 to 8 weeks. And the question that Akira asked him is, John, who would you be if everything you do was taken away from you? He says, right now you are not an archer. You can't even shoot. So who are you? I think every athlete who's been injured, who has a coach who stopped playing, who put a lot of stock of their identity into I am an athlete, has felt this before, right? It's very easy to do because you get positively reinforced for being the captain or the soccer dude or the baseball guy. He says, so easy for me, Akira said, to get caught up in the results I get from working with people, to get lost in the work or in response from my archers. I constantly have to remind myself that my value comes from who I am, not from what I do. It is easy to feel like your value is much greater when your teams win, when you make a lot of money, when you experience great success in business. But it is just as easy to feel defeated and depressed when your teams aren't winning, when your business is failing, when it feels like you are failing at everything. The truth is, here's the point, that your value is constant, it is priceless, and it never truly goes up or down based on the results of your performance. Your value comes from who you are, not from what you do. Every human being is infinitely priceless. Here's something we all need to hear. You are more than an athlete. You are more than a parent, a brother, a daughter. You are more than a coach. You are more than a CEO. And you are more than just some fast food worker. When your identity gets wrapped up in what you do, it clouds every decision you make. Find your identity, he says, in something that cannot simply be stripped away in a moment, but instead do the hard work of reminding yourself that your value comes from who you are. So, where does your identity come from?
This is going to be a lot bigger topic than I was thinking or planning. What does it mean that because you are human, you are priceless, or have why? Question to why. That question of why. Why would a human have infinite value? What about a human makes him or her have infinite value? I think these are super important questions to ask, because if you can't answer them, it's going to end up putting you in a very weird place.
Yeah.
Is what I would say. That would be the deep route that we could go. I think, kind of as you first started talking, what it made me think of is, I think a great example of this is, let's say, running killers, right? What they're most affectionately known as. I do something in the soccer world called a death valley, but it's the same principle, right? You're running to a line, you're running back to a line, running to another line, running back to a line. And there will be kids, athletes, that will half butt it, right? There will be kids, athletes who just won't run all the way into the line, run all the way to a line, right? They'll cut it short, they'll round it off a little early, da 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 da. And it's always been the thing that I kind of just got on early on. It's like, I don't care. I don't care if you go to the line. I don't care if you go past the line. I don't care if you go in front of the line. Because at the end of the day, you're not cheating me. Why am I going to be offended? Why am I going to be bothered? You are cheating yourself. You are the one who's cutting corners. You are the one who's saying, no, this is good enough. And if that's how you want to go, fine. That's on you. But the point that I'm trying to get at is, when you show up, I'm not trying to say like, oh, I am going to run to the line this time. The point I'm trying to get is, I run to lines. Like, I run all the way. It's not a matter of what I'm going to do. It's just a matter of who I am. And this is a big thing that I've heard come out recently in this attempt to build self-discipline is you don't sit there and say, okay, I am going to do X, or I'm going to try and do X. It's just, I do it. It's who I am. I am the person who does the thing. Period. Right. So you said like, okay, here I am. As the start of it is me. The start of it is the thing. Like, the subject is me. The subject is not the thing. This is what I do. This is who I am. And I think it's a really powerful thing in athletics. If we can get kids to switch their brains on of, oh, this is just who I am. This is how I do the thing. That's because it's coming from who I am and what I value and the principles that I own and believe in is a much powerful thing that will carry you further.
This is something that you and I have talked about this at length before, of one dream I have for the coaching industry. And this is N of one, is someone you've kind of pointed me in the direction of, and it's kind of, as I've learned, this is pillar number 6 of, I think, 17 or something like that. There's a lot of pillars here. Is I really don't care about your X's and O's. I really don't care anymore. Like, I mean, I love like learning about, like, I'll just pick baseball hitting and like breaking down a pitching motion. I love all that. I think that comes fairly naturally to people who love coaching. What I don't see, what I hope to see more of, is kind of what you were saying about culture. This is what it means to be a insert, Little Falls Flyers, right? And I'm not saying I don't know anything about the coaches and what their culture is and like this is what we do, but like actually getting nuts and bolts down to, it's the article I sent you the other day of like the Texas Rangers. Like, it wasn't just words on a wall. Like, we went back to those and we looked at them every day. Those became our chop wood, carry water. And that's something that I really love and would love a context of, is I don't really care what you choose. Wouldn't have these things. He never deliberately taught this. Most of his players would say, yeah, he had it, but he didn't walk them through step by step. And here's what it is. And I'm not saying you don't tell your players what your values are. I think you probably should. If you have 4 of them, well, explicitly teach them. Here's how we do that. But more of that is infinitely interesting to me. And I agree about the cheating yourself and whatnot. The one thing I wanted to apply from this one is it was from, I think, John Tyson's The Intentional Father, is I would love to just look at the players at the beginning of the year and say, no matter what happens this season, I love you, I appreciate you, and I care about you more as a person than I do as an athlete. And the phrase I want to say that he said to his son is, you play from a blessing, not for a blessing. Like, you are already blessed. You are already cherished and loved by walking in here. You don't need to earn anything from me. I'm here to guide you and, to help you through those inevitable ups and downs. Because I think Akira says that. He's like, nobody would want to read a story of a hero that had nothing bad happen in it. There's no adversity. Well, no, that's boring. Like, oh yeah, they went from A to B. Congrats. We want Rudy, right? We want Rudy to make the team in the last, and to play in the last game and to get that sack and get carried off the field. So it would be really boring if he just signed up and then he made the sack. But we got to see that whole behind the scenes. So I want to see just even my own self as being more intentional about that culture of the valuing your athletes, and so that they are already playing from that blessing versus trying to earn it from the coach or earn it from their parents or earn it from society. It's like, you've already got it, guys. Whether you score 20 points or 2, it's going to be okay. And do we ever say that? Like, I never, I knew it from a couple of people, but like explicitly set the foundation on something like that. And so not only for myself, like the self-control to know you are more as a coach, like, hey, if your team goes 1-17 versus 18-0, you're going to be okay. Like, you're still all right. So I think the athletes and the coaches, everybody needs to hear that. Hey, guess what? Your kid is still really cool, even though he's the sixth man, right? Because we put so much stock into status that we seem to forget this sometimes, because it's very easy to do.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me rant. I didn't mean to rant, but
that was good. You just preached the gospel, and I don't even know that you knew that you did it.
Oh, go me.
Yeah, obedience because you're loved as opposed to obedience to earn love is a massive difference in the human psyche. One is borderline trauma inducing, and the other is a fulfilling way to go through life, right? And by one of the Bible lays out over and over and over again that we are loved initially. We didn't do anything. In fact, we've done a lot of wrong things, but we have been loved through all of it. And then once we come to realizing how loved we are, then we have this heart response, this heart's change to say, oh, you love me through all of that? Okay, yep, I'll follow you through thick and thin, right? So I think it's a great point to bring out in the coaching world, right? We love our players, and then all the things stuff happens, not the opposite way. Not all the things stuff, and then we decide who we love, right? Now, I may like some certain players more or less on a given day because they're testing me a little bit, but I love them all the same, and that started day 1. It didn't start day 50 when they achieved whatever goal. Right? It's a massive thing to understand in the whole grand scheme and how things and timing play out.
I loved one I read. I don't remember which book. Wooden said that. He's like, oh, I'll love them all the same, but I don't like them all the same. It's like, you don't like all your teachers all the same either. You don't even like your friends all the same, and that's okay. But are you required to love them all? Yeah. And just the making a jest of that is hilarious. Ooh,
all right. You touched on this one. This might be my favorite one so far. Probably spend the least amount of time on it, but because I think it speaks for itself. But mastery in the 49-year roast.
Oh, okay. So for the uninitiated, a roast. So this is a Comedy Central that they like pick a celebrity and then everybody just bashes them. First off, it takes incredible courage. So anybody that's appeared on it, good for them. Like, they just don't take themselves too seriously. And then they do get a chance to rebuttal at the end. So Comedy Central, let's just say Justin Bieber gets up there. And all these famous people get up and they get to say everything they've ever wanted to say about Justin Bieber, which was an episode for the record. And I didn't realize how much material you could pull on Justin Bieber. Like, it was just like, whoa. And I don't make a habit of watching that. And then he got to, call out everybody that was in there. And that was equally as funny because it's Justin Bieber and then all of these other different people from the other different worlds. So in Chop Wood, Carry Water, we get a 49-year roast. And what I mean by that is Akira is trying to teach in the previous chapter what the path to mastery looks like. So he draws, John's very frustrated. He's like, I'm stuck. I'm doing this. I'm not going to get there. Like, he's about to give up. And what Akira does is he draws George Leonard's The Path to Mastery. The idea is like, what we want is to go from A to B as quick as possible. That's not real. That doesn't really happen. How it feels emotionally is just, you're all over the place. You're up, you're down, you're everywhere in between. How mastery actually works is you have a growth spurt, you hit a plateau, you hit a growth spurt, you have a plateau, and sometimes those plateaus take a long time. And this is one point I disagree with the book is sometimes to break through a plateau, you kind of got to overdo it sometimes. Not forever, but Jocko talks about this in his kids' books that, he's teaching his nephew to do pull-ups, and he's kind of stuck at doing this many pull-ups. So one day he, says, hey, we're going to do 100 pull-ups. I don't care how many rounds or rep or times it takes. We're getting 100 pull-ups today. So to break through that, he overshoots a little bit. But Jonathan, the point to this is Jonathan makes this retort, which sometimes happens. And I want to say, like, this is okay from your athletes sometimes, like, not to judge them so harshly when they kind of snap because they're frustrated. He says, he's tired of all the philosophical sayings and stories, and he's trying to teach him what this process looks like from a wider perspective. He says, you make it sound so easy, but I bet you can't even hit the target anymore, old man. And Akira calmly responds, meet me back here at 10 tonight. So the next chapter, he comes in 10 o'clock on the dot and only has 2 arrows and just bullseyes them. But the second arrow, he splits through the first arrow. Now, obviously, that's for effect, right? This isn't Robin Hood. But John he can't even see the target, right? It's so dark. John's like, how on earth did you do that? It's impossible. And Akira just says, many years of chop wood carry water. He indicated the bottom step of the drawing he had last time, the day before. He says, first year, you must learn to aim with your eyes. Second year, you must learn to draw your bow smoothly, hold it stable, and aim it with your muscles. Third year, you must learn to breathe slowly, control your diaphragm, and aim with your lungs. Okay? Some people don't even get that far, for the record. And you think of how long it takes. But he repeated this all the way to the top of the drawing, and here's where the roast comes in, where he stopped. John, I've been chopping wood and carrying water for 49 years. And while you may only aim with your eyes and your muscles and your lungs right now, I aim with everything. The way I stand, the position of my feet, how much tension I put into the bow, how much tension I have in my hands, how I breathe, and what I see in my mind all impact the end result. Everything impacts everything. Everything is aiming. You have much to learn, John. Get to sleep. And tomorrow we chop wood, carry water. I was like, boom, boom, like, roast. Like, I was like, oh, and then he has nothing to say. What do you say to that? And I'm not suggesting that all coaches like be able to dunk the basketball, hit a 500-foot home run, throw 90 miles per hour when you're 65 years old. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is what the mastery actually looks like. And having the patience and humility to understand where people are at, and the journey it takes to get there. What do you think of the 49-year roast? Because that blew my mind. Of just be able to it's like, remember in Fight Club when he shows like the little scar on his hand? It's like, no, I've been there, dude. And how much respect that garners you. It's like, whoa, like you do know what this is like. But the gap between 49 years and 3 years is huge.
Yep. I think there's so many good things with that, but first you kind of have the path to mastery of it being a step. This situation is a little bit different because it's just one student necessarily. I don't know if there were other students involved in this process at all. When you're talking about a young athlete, right, there's a lot of people involved that are going through the same process that you are. So when you plateau, it oftentimes will feel like you're actually falling because other people are breaking through at that point in time. And so a gap may be widening, so it feels like you're not actually plateauing, but you're going downward, which isn't true. And it goes into a topic that we didn't necessarily touch on, but I know the book touches on of looking at others and comparing yourself and what kind of poison that can be. So that kind of touches on that idea. You know, I loved what you said, that it's okay for your athletes to be frustrated. Like, obviously, as young people, it's very easy to not have the perspective, not even lose it, just not have the perspective of what others may have gone through. And we have a tendency when we're growing up to think like we're the only one going through it, or, you know, the world is most after me, kind of a deal. And so it's important to be able to share that perspective, allow them to get that frustration out, and then share that perspective of, no, the reason I do this is because I've gone through it a long time. You know, even if you're a young coach, you're in your early 20s, you still have experience. Whether you can kick a ball as far as the kids that you coach or not, you have the experience. That is, it's way more powerful than I think we give credence for, of what that experience really, or how it can pay off when we teach. So there's a lot more to it than just the physical activity. There's all of the lessons that we learned along the way that made us better people. That's important to share with our students.
I agree. And the thing that I think as an athlete, to have the humility or self-control, just because you look at a coach and they look like a has-been, probably are a has-been, doesn't mean they can't help guide you there. So there are plenty of examples of trainers and coaches who help athletes do things that they never could do. Right? I mean, you think of like Tim Grover and Michael Jordan. Tim Grover got nowhere close to whatever Michael Jordan could do. Similar to Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson did play in the NBA, but did he coach people who were much better than him reach new heights? Yeah. So based on what you see from your teacher, your sensei, your coach, you know, it is wrong to say, oh, I bet you couldn't even hit the target, old man. It's natural to feel that way. I think that's not wrong to feel like that. And it just is for great effect of this book that the guy can just still smoke it, right? I think it's great. Paints a beautiful picture. But to have that, you know, to say, okay, they're trying to help me here, right? And we talk about, Wooden talks about the controlling the emotions and to be able to, okay, they're trying to help me get here. Okay. And what does that look like? So I don't think we always need the show. Although if you can pull off the show, do the show, right? I mean, I taught middle school, you know, or I coached middle school baseball. So you know what they needed sometimes? A healthy dose of 3 curveballs and sit on the bench. You know, yes, you can hit a fastball. Great. You know, coach, I want you to throw. No, you don't. Okay, fine. You know, and it didn't have to be great, but it's like, okay, you get in there. Let's go. I said, if it, you know, we did that for fun, right? And it was part of my own ego. But I remember we were going to do running or something. It was just a little conditioning after practice. So, hey, coach, if we can hit it past you, do we have to do the running? I said, no. I said, if one of you can hit, you can take as many swings as you want, but as soon as you make, if you miss, swing and miss, you're out. If you fall it off, you're out. If it's a strike, you're out. But if you make contact, you hit past me, we won't run. I remember doing that kind of like Satchel Paige style. One kid did make it by me by like 3 inches. It was terrible. It was like one of the last kids, and he barely bunted it. But yeah, I mean, the point of this is like, what does mastery actually look like, and what does it feel like, and the ability to guide somebody through that. So the 49-year roast.
Yep, I love it. I think at the end of the day, you know, for me, I always tell people, like, I wasn't the greatest soccer player to ever live, so it is useless for me to try and teach you everything I know, because you are so severely capped by that.
Yeah.
But what I do want to do is take off the blinders to get you to realize maybe how good you can be, right? To give you an environment where you can find your best, not discover my best. And I think in a lot of ways that statement of, you shoot with your eyes, you shoot with your muscles, you shoot with your lungs, but I shoot with everything. That comment remove some of the blinders that he had on.
Yep.
I was like, I never thought about it that way. I'm focusing on this specific technique and that specific technique, and you're doing everything. Like, I got to pay attention to my feet, and I got to pay attention to my surroundings and all of the things and the stuff that go into it. I think is really a powerful line in that that I take away.
Yeah, and the only last thing I'll say on this one is I heard recently, I think it was Driscoll, pastor in your state of all places. He said, as dads, we should be our kids' floor, not their ceiling. Mm-hmm. I'm like, whoa. I mean, one of those another jaw droppers. So coaches, your level of expertise should be their floor, not their ceiling. So you should expect that however far or however good you are, that is the minimum that they're going to achieve. Mm-hmm. And they should be, your kids, your athletes, your students, whoever it is, should be infinitely better than you. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't, I had to sit with that one for a second. I'm like, ooh, that's good.
Yeah, it's spot on. Mm-hmm. All right, last one before we go to most valuable idea. The Warrior Dial. What number is needed for you at your best?
The Warrior Dial. Oh man. And again, we don't cover everything in a book. It's not possible other than if you just read it. So the Warrior Dial is one tool that very much stood out to me that I think we need to consider. And it was the second tool in the chapter called Warrior Dial. And the first technique he was trying to teach Jonathan is labeling and be able to label our experiences and filter it. But the second one was called this Warrior Dial. And I think this is an interesting visual. So think about your Warrior Dial as being from 1 to 10. 1 is ultra stealth mode and barely moving, like ninja style. Pick your movie of choice. 10 is a super hyped kamikaze screaming and running into a building with a bomb strapped to them. That's a little graphic, but we'll take it. And Akira says, think about today, based off the context of the day and it being your first day back after he broke his arm and he's been out for a long time. Where do you think you are at on the Warrior Dial? And Jonathan says, well, I'm probably an 8 or a 9. Akira nodded. He said, yeah. And where do you think you need to be at your best and not get re-injured? John replied, honestly, I'm not sure. Growing up, I'd always been taught that you were supposed to get hyped before games by watching movies like Braveheart and listening to upbeat music. We were laughing before about Disturbed, like, let the bodies hit the flow. Okay. Just getting jacked. I never really thought about this before. And he says, then I'm glad we were talking about it now, said Akira. I think the best samurai archers would tell you your best shooting will happen around a 4 or 5. If your dial is too high, you are more likely to miss your targets. And so he asked, well, how do you turn your Warrior Dial down? Because I'm at an 8 or 9 and I need to get to a 4 or 5. He says, I was hoping you would ask. You can turn your Warrior Dial down by doing deep breathing exercises, talking slower, lowering your voice, listening to classical music, and slowing your movements. In fact, many of your teams in the West would benefit from turning their dial down before the big games and turning it up before the smaller games. And then he talks about, dialing, it up with inspirational movies, upbeat music, jumping around. So the inverse or opposite of that. He says it takes practice, but you'll get the hang of it. So talk to me about the Warrior Dial. What's your experience with the Warrior Dial, either as a player or a coach? Now, I'll save mine because I'll tell both sides of the story. But what do you think of the Warrior Dial?
I love it. I think it's something that most coaches should explore more with their teams. I mean, for me, sorry, not trying to knock football here, but this first became, obviously I didn't know it was the Warrior Dial, but it became apparent to me this pregame hoopla in football teams. And it always registered to me as almost like a blind rage, a blind anger in a lot of ways. And it's not that I haven't been a part of big games and understood focus and getting your brain right and mental preparation and all that stuff. But it just always seemed like such a blind, like we're just smacking each other on the head. We're screaming loudly at the top of our lungs. We're I get it, it's a physical game, but it just felt like such blind rage of just, I'm going to run out there and tear everything apart and out of that. And so that's where I started to kind of mess around with this idea of like mentality before game and what it looks like. And then I came across people like Brad Stevens, who was always very. So that was a mentality that I adopted. I would often listen to that music beforehand, but it manifested in a lot different ways, right? So like, I would listen to a lot of Eminem before games, and I basically call it lyrical cocaine because it was just like it could get you going.
I'm writing that down. Lyrical cocaine. Oh man, don't fall for the. Oh man, yes. Keep going. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. So, but I'm such a laid back guy that to me that had the effect of almost probably bringing me into the middle, so to speak, and getting me in the right mindset for the physical aggression that I'm going to have to do, but also the mental focus and clarity of what I'm going to have to do. That's where I found my balancing point.
Yep.
As a coach, I've coached teams where, they had to be pretty quiet, pretty serious, pretty locked in to perform at their best. I've coached teams where there had to be a minimum of like 25 minutes of laugh time before the game for them to play best. So I've seen it across the spectrum. And I think I've done it long enough now where I also just get the feel of where they're at. Like there can be like, I've seen teams that have this locked in laughing focus. It's really bizarre, but like they're giggling before the game, but you just know they're locked in and ready to go. And I've seen teams that, they're super serious and locked in. You can just tell that something ain't right here. You guys aren't really, something's not connected right now. And so I think there's a lot of variability to it, but I think coaches at the very least should kind of assess and take a look at it. Doesn't always have to be look the same way for every team in every game.
Yeah, and one thing I would love is we just need to like make a whole bunch of products for free off of every book we read, because I would like personally use this. So first off, we need blindfolds, just blindfolds. We're gonna have to like trademark that, like just blindfold, like, hey, chop wood, carry water. And we could put a little like insignia on there. But for this one, like just even having like this visual of the dial, right? And it reminds me of radio frequencies is the note I made. Remember like when you're scrolling through like AM or an FM and it's like, I just wanted to do that on the mic for the record. But then you get to the right frequency, like where you get partial song, but then you get the 98.5. Oh, there's the station. It reminds me of that. And so just even like as a team being mindful or aware and like the ability to be aware of it first off, and then secondly to have the tools in place to turn the dial, right? Deregulate, upregulate, downregulate, upregulate. And one thing we talked a lot about when we were going through flow coaching was matching your state, like your biological state, to your task. That's why mindfulness and prayer and breathing is so popular right now, because it's cheap, easy. Like, I mean, you can literally change your biology just by doing that, by controlling your breath and what you think. And so a lot of coaches are teaching that kind of thing. So what I wanted to say about this is I fell for this hook, line, and sinker. You talk about getting jacked up before everything, like, and I would over psych myself out, right? Because like we're getting in the zone, like that's how that's what we were taught, right? I mean, so yeah, everybody had, and it was like kind of a badge of honor at the time when you had to burn CDs or like download your own music. Like what was on your get jacked up playlist? Like that, everybody has that thing. Like, and we talked about that at another time. Is like, what was the song that got you jacked up? So I do want to ask you that. So what you said Eminem. What was your lyrical cocaine? Like, what was the thing that probably didn't match your state to task? But did you have anything that really is like, oh yeah, that's what I listened to?
Cinderella Man by Eminem was one. Seven Nation Army.
Ooh.
I listened to, what else was on there? There'd be Linkin Park on there. Boom by POD was on there. And that's the gist of it. Everything else is kind of in one of those four.
I don't really have anything like specific to add. I was always one of those like I like fast music or anything that's catchy. So if it was kind of in that realm. But I'll never forget being the youngest starter on a varsity football team and walking into public school in 10th grade, and like the environment around like getting ready for the game and how loud those speakers were and the music. What was the what was the band? It wasn't Disturbed was on the playlist, but it was another rock band and they were just screaming. I'm like, what is this place? And I'm like, I'm usually a little bit more reserved. Like, I don't mind getting focused, but I'm like, is this how we do it around here? And like, guys are like hitting each other. And it was exactly what you're describing in football culture. I'm going to have to think of that band, but it was unreal. So lyrical cocaine is a thing. But to the point. Oh, God.
No, to this day, Till I Collapse and Cinderella Man by Eminem, if you throw those on, it'll make me want to punch somebody.
So I do want to maybe get a little practical tactile with this one, and I'm glad we brought up the Warrior Dial. I want to talk about Josh Waitzkin and the Warrior Dial. So Josh Waitzkin was the protagonist for Searching for Bobby Fischer. Prodigy in chess, became a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master under one of the Gracie brothers. But he talked about in one of his podcasts that he would have a trigger song, and he only used that song when he needed to get to a certain state of arousal for his competition. So his song, his lyrical cocaine, was Lose Yourself by Eminem. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I want to paint the picture for you, is he could be sleeping or eyes closed, laying on the mat, comatose as can be, like a 1 or a 2 on the Warrior Dial. And then what he would do is he would play the song and would dial him up to what he needed to be. I'm not saying it was a 10, but it was whatever it needed to be. And he could be on the mat in 30 seconds. So the idea is, I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like, I don't think it's good to do the unregulated football culture, but to be mindful and to say, how can we have a practice to be able to say, okay, guys, where are we at right now? Just check in. We're at 7. Where do we need to be today? Well, it's a big game. Let's maybe dial that down and take like 15 seconds and do a couple 4, 7, 8 breaths or something, right? Whatever the task is easily Googleable. I think that's interesting. Or even saying, okay, Jake, I have Till I Collapse. When would be the right time to need that? And even testing it, right? I don't think, it talks about at the end of the book about experimenting. Try that out. How'd it go for you? I mean, we don't have to, if Till I Collapse works for you in that situation or over a period of time, who am I to say, like, not do it? Right. But being mindful and intentional about where your dial is and where it needs to be, so you as an individual or even as a group can be at your best. Because I don't think as a whole group, we should all be listening to Disturbed at level volume 15 necessarily. It is good for group camaraderie. Maybe that's your group song. Remember, like the Nike Power song from, I think, Reality is Broken. I think that's fair. Or even having it in practice, right? Like, hey guys, we're going to do this thing. Where do we need to dial up a little bit? Very underrated tool.
Yeah, it is.
We need more of this.
I chuckle because in college, the football team was notorious for doing freshman hazing in the lunchroom. So like making a freshman get on a table and sing a song, right? Silly, innocent stuff, but it was hazing. Make them embarrassed, uncomfortable, whatever.
Yep.
And there's always a build up to do it, right? And all of a sudden you'd start hearing a bunch of big old dudes are, yeah, let's go, and then they're smacking each other over there, and we're in the lunchroom, guys. And so then the soccer team would just start yelling out, testosterone, quarterback, sign. Right, like just playing into it. So that was kind of where I cut my teeth. And what is going on over there? What are they doing? That's making them behave. Yeah, no, not your kids or anything.
Okay, that's what I was like.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Just an acknowledgement and awareness of it and playing around with it. Maybe your team in big games needs to be amped up more. Teams will obviously there's multiple personalities within a team, but teams then will take on kind of an overall personality.
Yep.
And it's important to be in tune to that personality and understanding, do I have a group of people that need to be pumped up a little bit? Do I have a group of people that need to be taken down a little bit? And it can vary on, we talk about an art, right? And it can vary upon what the game is, who you're playing, the importance of it, etc. So there's definitely an art to it, but I think it
Well,
starts with just paying attention and coming up with some tools to control it.
and realize that not everybody's, we're an N of one. So I remember relentlessly teasing my wife that she had to downregulate before when she would sprint and track. And I was like, why do you listen to all these slow songs? How can you even so she was already so amped up that if she didn't do that, she could literally almost throw up. Right.
Mhm.
So she had this anxiety that she was able to dial down. And whereas I thought it was you always had to go up. There's a one-way street to get ready for a game, and it's northward.
Mhm.
So to realize that some kids, like if they have a little bit of pressure or whatever it would be, really do need that laughter, like you said about your, that one group of kids. And if that works for them, great. And just even monitoring that, like, oh man, this is a big game. How can we adjust that? Because sometimes it is hard, and you do fall flat in a big game or a small game. There's plenty of examples of that, right? We could beat this team, but we don't. Or we play a team that we should easily beat and we don't beat them. It's ugly. It's an ugly win. Win's a win, but still ugly. So when we're talking about wins, success, and doing the best you're capable of being, one thing you can control is adapting your dial, whether it's pre-game, during game, post-game. I don't think the dial matters as much, but although I could be wrong. Maybe don't go crazy party. It's like, hey, it's one win, guys. Let's go back to a 3. I need you to be at a 1. Go to bed. Do not go kamikaze partying with Gronk in Vegas. No. Good call.
Fair.
Good call.
All right. I love it. That brings us to the most valuable idea.
Cool. So this is at the end, or towards the end, and I love books. I mean, as more we read books and cover a lot of these, they just kind of stand out like a sore thumb now. But Akira asks John towards the end, he says, now, can you think of 4 principles you've learned thus far from your time here that you want to live by? So it's the discussion of living by principles over feelings. He says, well, John's like, well, 1, you are building your own house. And don't worry about anything else. Just build your own house. 2, to play present, you must train to live present. That's going to be really fun because our next pillar is alertness. So we're going to be able to talk about what that looks like. 3, you must surrender the outcome and commit to the process or you will become your own worst enemy. Ooh, it's good. And 4, no matter what my circumstances are, always chop wood and carry water. And, in this section, he talks about, many days you're just not going to feel like doing blank. But the principle says you got to reap what you sow. Diligent workers are going to serve kings instead of ordinary men. The principle says to turn the other cheek, to seek wise counsel, to speak life and not death. And the warning at the end of the book is very similar to that. So the author, Mr. Medcalf, talks to us. He's like, a lot of people, this book went pretty big. He's like, the danger is that like these short chapters create an illusion and gives you kind of a high, I guess, literary cocaine. Where you can get really jacked up and until reality sinks in, whether it's day 2 or month 119. And he's like, it's not easy to do. Like, you can't just read it. You got to apply it. So go ahead and read it 5, 10, 50 times until you apply what you learn. You must start to experiment with what chop wood, carry water looks like in your own life. You have to do the work. And he quotes Saban here and says, it takes what it takes about greatness. So he ends with some stop doing and start doing, and I'll be done there. He says, stop pretending you get to live twice. Stop getting by with average. Stop settling for easy. Stop settling for counterfeits. Stop living someone else's life. Stop chasing other people's versions of success. And have the self-control to start pursuing excellence. Start beating on your craft. Start doing what you're created for. And start becoming relentless in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. So those were some of the most valuable ideas that kind of encapsulated this narrative of John, or as he renames himself at the end, kind of like biblically from Abram to Abraham, Jonathan, because it's more mature instead of Johnny or John, of chopping wood and carrying water. Any highlights that you like either from that or from the breadth of today?
I mean, the surrendering of the outcome and committing to the process is the biggest thing that I would take away. There's so much out of our control. So we really have to focus on what we can control and the details of what we can control. And the outcome will be the outcome. And we have to be okay with that. Otherwise, we're going to lose our minds. I think you can't truly control yourself until you realize you can't control the things outside of self. And we spend so much time trying to control things outside of ourselves that we forget to control ourselves. So I think that part in particular is spot on, absolutely spot on.
And neither Jake or I, if I've never said this, are preaching from the pulpit of like above reproach. Like every time, I mean, we've talked about this on a couple of the other episodes that we need this. Like, it's not like we're perfect at these things. One second. I'll be right there. We're not perfect at any of these things, and that we need these lessons. I mean, I'm in probably the first third of learning, practice, poetry, progression of a coach or just a person. And it's easy to fall for these traps. And I don't think it's wrong or to think that you never, ever fall into this trap. It's like, okay, you're in the trap. Now what? Right? And not beating yourself up too much or, assassinate your own character or whatever. But to know that you can come out of that and to, again, get back on the train and say, okay, I'm going to live by the principle of self-control. I'm going to be better. Doesn't mean that what happened or what is excusable. But at some point you get going. So I really, really enjoyed this book. It was so simple. It was complex. I guess I would say. Yep. So, all I'm going to add in the end is to top it off is, little foreshadow. Our last book in the series is Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko. I think my joke last episode in the preview was we got to talk like Jocko for at least half the episode or more. Challenge accepted. Our flashback is this is the fourth book of the series. We've covered Discipline Equals Destiny by Ryan Holiday, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson, and A Complaint-Free World by Mr. Bowen. And do check out the other episodes in the playlist. What do you like? What would be the principles you'd want to build a program around? We've covered the industriousness, enthusiasm, friendship, loyalty, cooperation, those 5 pillars on the bottom of John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, and we're almost through self-control. It's been quite a ride, and love to have you join with us. Just thanks for joining, and appreciate it. Thanks for learning along with us. This is a lot of fun, and hopefully you took something away from the 49-year roast, lyrical cocaine, and the warrior dial.
For sure.
Jake, yeah. Final words?
I appreciate it. Appreciate everything, Kevin. It's a good time.
Good time. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one, and never stop learning.